Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at some anticipated releases for the third quarter of the year because it is now almost the end of June. Not quite, but we are very close, which means we're moving into that third quarter, and this is basically just going to be a list of things that I'm excited for that are coming out from July to September, and hopefully there's going to be something on this list that you'll be excited about as well. I think there's some really cool stuff coming out in the next few months. Before we dive into the July books, though, I do want to mention one book that's coming out right here at the end of June that is one that I'm just personally extremely excited for, and this is The Bound Worlds by Megan E. O'Keefe. This is the conclusion to the Devoured Worlds trilogy, and I'm so excited for this book. I just read the first book in the series, like, last week, I think. And I am completely obsessed with it. I just love the characters in this. The world is super interesting. And I've got the second book. I actually went out and bought the second book because I loved the first book so much. And I had some rewards money, so I was able to like justify it. But I went out and bought the second book so I can read it before this third book is coming out, but I'm not actually going to get to it in time. But I am going to be reading The Fractured Dark, the second book, in July, and I just wanted to put this out here that the conclusion is coming here at the end of June on June 25th, and if you're like excited about this series or have been thinking about picking it up, I cannot more highly recommend the first book at least, and I'm very excited to see where the story for this one is going to end up. So then, moving into the July books, the first thing I have on my list is The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song, which is a Mulan-inspired fantasy. This one is coming out on July 2nd, and it's following a young woman who, her father is an opioid addict, and he is planning to sell her off. But what happens is that he refuses the Imperial draft, and she ends up dressing up as a man to take his place in the army to escape him and the kind of abusive man that he wants to marry her off to in order to get to the dowry for her. So she ends up going off to war, and it sounds like there's going to be a bit of a love triangle because there's a mention of like a prince that she is fighting alongside and then an enemy prince who is making her question some things, and she also is approached by the spirit of a sea dragon that is offering her some power in exchange for something that it wants. So it has some sort of unknown agenda, and it sounds like it's going to be like very twisty and exciting, and I think it's going to be really fun, and especially if you really like the story of Mulan, it sounds like it's going to be a really cool version of that. So then we have on the same day, July 2nd, A Talent for Murder by Peter Swanson, which is a book about a librarian, I believe, who believes her new husband is possibly a murderer. That's all I know about this, and I think I've seen that it's generally better read alongside his other books, like it's supposed to be a standalone, but it works better if you've read the other books of his that precede it. So I don't really know what to expect for this one, but the premise of like a librarian thinking her husband is a murderer just sounded really fun to me. Then on July 9th, we're getting a Navola or Navola, I'm not really sure the pronunciation on that, but it's by Paolo Bacigalupi, and this one is a Venice-inspired fantasy about a guy who is basically the heir to one of the influential ruling families in this Venetian-like city, or Venice-like city. I don't know what the correct version of that is. Anyway, the guy is an heir to a ruling family, and there is an heirloom, like a dragon eye, that belongs in his family that seems to be calling him to action, but he's basically preparing to take up the reins of power, and it's going to be like very political fantasy, it sounds like. I haven't read anything from this author yet, but I do have one of his books, The Water Knife, on my shelf, and it sounds like he does a lot of kind of thrillery, literary things, so I'll be interested to see what this one is like as a fantasy story. Then on July 16th, we're getting I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones, which is a slasher written from the killer's point of view, set in Texas, I think in the 1980s. I don't know anything about this beyond that, and I really don't care to because I just love everything I've read from Stephen Graham Jones, and I'm very excited for a new slasher coming in the summer. I really feel like horror is a great summer genre. Like for me, I equate summer with horror a lot. So I'm very excited to be getting this one this summer, and I will probably try to read it as soon as it comes out. Also on July 16th, we're getting The Lotus Empire by Tasha Suri, which is I think another series conclusion. This is the end of the Burning Kingdoms series. I haven't read the first book of this yet, which is The Jasmine Throne, but a friend of mine read that and said it was really, really good. It's really slow, but really like political and great characters, so I think it's going to be a really great book. I think it's going to be a great series overall because I've heard so many good things about the series, not even just from my friend, but like in generally reviews online. So I just want to put that out there for anybody who has been enjoying the series, if that conclusion is coming on July 16th. Then on August 6th, we're getting The Seventh Veil of Salome by Sylvia Morena Garcia. This is one of my most anticipated releases of the year, and I'm really interested in the fact that it's another book about like Mexican film history, so I think that's going to be really cool. But this one's set in 1950s Mexico, following two actresses who both want this specific role. One of them is cast in the role and the other one really wants the role because it's supposed to be kind of a like career-making role as Salome in an upcoming movie. And then it's also about the way that these two women's lives intertwine with the story of Salome, and I think that's going to be really interesting. It sounds very literary. It also sounds like there's going to be a lot of like backstabbing and like relationship drama, but like in an interesting way. So I'm really curious to see what this one is going to be like, because her previous book was Silver Nitrate, which was 1990s Mexico, I think, or 1980s. I think it was the 90s. But it was also about like film history. So I'm really curious to see how this is going to differ from that. It's obviously a different time period, but I really liked Silver Nitrate, and it's very much a horror book, and it has some fantasy elements. So it sounds like this is not going to have that. And I'm really interested to see what this is like, having read Silver Nitrate already. I'm curious about like the differences and the, you know, some of the overlaps that I'm going to find there. But of course, I also just love everything that Sylvia Moreno Garcia writes, and I actually have an arc of this one I'm planning to read at the end of July to be prepared for the book to come out. But yeah, it just sounds really cool, and I'm really excited. Also on August 6th, we're getting The Dead Cattail Assassins by Peter Jelley Clark. I did talk about this in my previous anticipated releases video, because this was originally supposed to come out, I think, in like April or May, but it has been pushed back to August 6th. This one is about a undead assassin, I believe, who is sent on a contract that puts her face to face with a past that she should not be able to remember, and it sounds like there will be severe consequences for her if she doesn't succeed in her contract, but that there is something bigger going on here that obviously connects to her past in probably a very interesting way, because Peter Jelley Clark is fantastic. I love everything I've read from him as well, and I really like the worlds that he creates, so I'm really curious about this. It sounds like it's going to be a little bit steampunky again, not quite in the same vein as the Dead Djinn and Cairo universe, but this does have like the Festival of the Clockwork King that is kind of the backdrop of the story. So I'm really excited to see what world he's created here and what this story is going to be like. Also, I think it's kind of a novella length, so that's going to be a really fun one as well. One more book coming out on August 6th is The Mercy of Gods by James S.A. Corey, which I believe is a writing duo that wrote that series that I can never think of the name of, but it starts with Leviathan Wakes. I don't really know anything about that series, but this one sounds really interesting, and actually sounds much more interesting to me personally than the previous series, although I have heard great things about that series. This one is following a group of survivors who are humans that have been abducted, basically, when their planet is destroyed by these enemy aliens called the Carricks, who show up and kill off most of humanity on this planet, but take a few of the best and brightest and throw them into an arena where they are put in competition with a bunch of other species that the Carricks has abducted in this manner. And so there is basically extinction on the line if they fail to like survive the situation, and they're trying to figure out how they can like manipulate the Carricks themselves to try and turn the situation to their advantage. So it sounds like it's going to be very like political and twisty. I'm not usually a fan of a competition kind of storyline, but the way this one is framed, where it's like an enemy set of aliens doing this as some sort of like Darwinian contest amongst other species, that I think is a little bit more interesting, and I am curious to see what this book is going to be like. Also, it seems like it's going to be a little bit in the vein of the Book of the Sun Eater, I think. That's the Christopher Verrocchio series. There's a guy who is like the protector of his people and the most hated man in history, where he's done like some really horrific things to try and protect his species, and it sounds like it's going to be interesting. It's like the story of how he becomes that figure, so I think that's going to be really interesting as well. I am looking forward to this one. Next up, we have Asunder by Kirsten Hall, which is coming out on August 20th, and this one I believe is about a woman who is a death speaker. It reminds me a little bit of the Cemeteries of Malo books with Thara Kalahar, but basically she's able to speak with the recently deceased, and she's using this ability in order to basically solve suspicious deaths. And she's gotten this ability through a bargain with some sort of like dark entity that is presumably going to collect on its debts soon, and she also manages to bind her shadow to a guy who is dying, or rather I think she binds him to her shadow, and they're having to work together to try and figure out some sort of mystery. The premise on this one was a little bit vague, and I'm not really entirely sure what to expect here, but again, it reminds me a little bit of Thara Kalahar, so I'm curious to see what another book that's doing similar like thing where somebody can talk to the recently deceased will do with that. particular kind of magic, and I also think that it sounds like it just could be really cool with some like eldritch monsters, and I'm curious to know about this like shadow magic thing that she's got going on, and I think it sounds like it's just going to be intriguing. I don't know what else to expect from this, and I haven't read anything from this author before, but I thought it was worth checking out. Then we've got on September 3rd, moving into this last month, we have Haunt Sweet Home by Sarah Pinsker. This one, I believe, is a novella length. I might be wrong on that, but it's about a woman who gets involved with her sister's TV show or web series that she has going on that's basically a combination of ghost hunting and home makeovers. And a lot of it is, you know, faked. So the sister, the main character, is doing a lot of like setting up fog machines in the woods and doing things to make things seem spooky, but then a set of unsettling events begins to happen on set, and she has some creepy new coworkers that she's having to deal with. So it sounds like maybe there is more to the haunting than first meets the eye, and I think this is also about her just kind of like figuring out who she wants to be and what kind of person she wants to be as she's like entering adulthood. So I think that sounds like it could be really fun and creepy, and I'm always excited for a story that's like exploring a character through horror, so very excited for that as well. And the cover's kind of cool. Then we have, I think, probably one of my most anticipated releases for September. On the 10th, we're getting The Examiner by Janice Hallett. I love Janice Hallett. Her books are so interesting. This is yet another mixed media mystery, this one being about a series of students who are in an arts master's program, and something ends up happening as somebody turns up dead, and basically we have to figure out, based on these documents that come from like their final exam and some like essays and text messages and things like that, who died, how they died, and who killed them. I just think that's like a lot of fun. I love a puzzly mystery, I love mixed media mystery, and I've loved pretty much everything I've read from Janice Hallett, and I cannot wait for this one. Another one coming out on the 10th is I'm the Grim Reaper, Volume 1 by Graveweaver. This is a manga series. I believe it's originally a webtoon, but it is being turned into like, you know, individual volumes and translated and everything. And this one is about a young woman, I think her name is Scarlet, who finds herself in hell after she has died, and she's had some sort of sinful life that she doesn't actually remember, but Satan offers her a deal and says basically you can avoid coming to the ninth circle of hell if you kill other sinners for me and collect their souls as a Grim Reaper. So she's sent back to the mortal realm as a Grim Reaper to try and collect other sinners' souls, and she has to collect one every day. But she ends up encountering a detective named Chase who is investigating something that seems to be tied up with whatever Scarlet's past was, whatever happened that sent her to hell in the first place. So she ends up teaming up with him to figure out what's going on while also trying to prevent him from figuring out that she's a Grim Reaper. Sounds like it's going to be super fun and kind of horror-y, kind of mystery, and I really like all of those elements. It sounds like it's just going to be a really exciting series. Then on the 17th of September, we have A Dark and Drowning Tide by Allison Saft, which is a sapphic fantasy. Hang on, my computer just went to sleep. Bump the mouse so that it comes back so I have my list again. So Dark and Drowning Tide on September 17th, Allison Saft. This is a sapphic fantasy about two academic rivals who have to team up to solve their mentor's murder. I don't know much beyond that, but I just thought this sounded like a lot of fun, and the cover is absolutely gorgeous, so I am looking forward to giving this one a try as well. Then on September 24th, we have Devils Kill Devils, and I actually don't know anything about this premise. I don't remember anything about it. I have heard some good things about Johnny Compton's previous book, which is Devil House? The Spite House, that's what it is. And I don't know what to expect, but I did see that this one is recommended for fans of Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and I pretty much stopped reading after that. I was like, yes, that is me. I want to read this. So I don't know anything about the premise. I just remember that it sounded kind of cool, and I'm gonna read it regardless. Another one coming out on September 24th is Graveyard Shift by ML Rio, which I think a lot of people are excited for. This is her first book, I think, since If We Were Villains, but this one is following a group of people who cross paths every night in a graveyard as they all are working like different kinds of late shifts, and one night they find an open grave and end up finding the gravedigger and following him around to figure out who this grave has been dug for and why. And it turns out there is some sort of mystery that is closer to all of them than they think, and that just sounds super like kind of spooky and creepy, but also like really twisty, and I'm excited to give it a shot. One more book coming out on the 24th is The Bloodless Queen by Joshua Philip Johnson. I don't remember a lot about this premise, but I know there's something to do with the Fae, and there's something about like children who, or people who die, and then they like resurrect and walk into the woods or something like that. I think it's supposed to be kind of like eco-criticism of some variety, and I think it's technically horror, but I really don't remember much beyond that. I just remember thinking it sounded odd and different, and the cover is kind of interesting, so I don't really know what to expect for this one either, but I think it sounded kind of cool. Lastly, a book that I'm really excited about, and one that I, again, have no idea what the premise is, but I genuinely don't care what the premise is. This is In the Shadow of the Ship by Elliot de Woodard, which is coming out sometime at the end of September. It's coming out from Subterranean Press, so they frequently don't have like specific dates up until fairly late. But this book is another in her Zuya universe of sci-fi novels, and I don't really care anything else beyond that, because I love all of the books in that series I've read so far. They're always like really exciting and twisty and political, and there's always like really good romance in them, so I'm looking forward to this. I'm pretty sure there's going to be another sentient mind ship in here. There is usually a sentient mind ship, and I love them, so again, I don't really care what the premise is. I just know there's going to be sentient mind ships and romance and probably some sort of mystery, and I'm going to have a lot of fun reading it. So those are all of the books that I'm aware of that are coming out that I'm excited for. Let me know down in the comments below if there are any books that I missed that are coming out in July, August, or September that you're excited about that I should have on my radar. And I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you'll consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.